Who is Nouri al-Maliki? And who is Ayad Allawi? First off, Ayad Allawi, once again, is the first prime minister post-Saddam Hussein of Iraq. He was not elected. He was put in place by American and the British governments. He is the one that this GOP-based lobbyist group is campaigning to get back into power. Now remember, Bush just a couple weeks ago really got on Maliki to move it because he can't keep this surge going on forever. And Clinton and Levin and a whole bunch of others also said we got to replace Maliki. And today the French president came out, Sarkozy, and said the same thing. So there's a concerted effort to bring Maliki's government down. Why? Well, Ayad Allawi was much more friendly to the American and British governments because he was a Ba'athist member, a cohort of Saddam Hussein, and which is the opposite side that Maliki is on, which we'll get into in a minute. And he came to loggerheads with Saddam Hussein and was exiled in the 70s. And he moved to London and started working with the British intelligence and eventually the CIA. And he made it his lifelong goal to get back at Saddam Hussein and get himself back into power. Now, in the 90s, he was behind a lot of coups to bring Saddam down with the CIA. That failed. And, of course, he got his shot in 2003 when we brought Saddam Hussein down and started the war in Iraq. Unfortunately, he wasn't too popular. Unfortunately for him in America, he wasn't too popular with the Iraqi people, mainly because he split town instead of staying at home and fighting for his people. So the Iraqi people didn't have a connection to him. And secondly, because the Iraqi people aren't dumb, they saw that he had very close ties to foreign governments, the British and the Americans, and they didn't trust that. So when the first free elections in Iraq happened, even though he had a lot of American money and a slick campaign, he lost. Every time America backs these people, like when Hamas won the elections in Palestine, I mean, then we just have egg on our face. We're for democracy, but uh-oh, our guy lost. So the guy who was elected, we weren't too happy about, was Ibrahim al-Jafari, and he was the first elected prime minister of Iraq. And he represented the Shiite-dominated population of Iraq, which is 80% Shiite. And he was a very staunch Shiite opposition fighter from the very beginning of that party, which was anti-Ba'athist, against the Ba'athists and Saddam Hussein's regime. And before that, his party was against the British-controlled government. So he's kind of on the opposite end of Allawi. Well, Jafari doesn't last long, even though he's freely elected, mainly because the Samarra bombings happened in 2006. That was the bombing of one of the holiest mosques of the Shiites in Iraq. The Americans got very, very afraid here because they didn't think that a guy who was so strongly part of the Shiite coalition, part of the government, could keep the peace with the Sunnis, who were now afraid of vengeance. So they pressured him and got him to step down. We already, right there, we interfered with our free elections, right? Well, that's where Nouri al-Maliki comes in. He takes over. America sees him, well, maybe as a compromise, more moderate Shiite. Now, Nouri al-Maliki, his party is the same one as Jafari's. His party is called al-Dawa. It means the call. And the two main parties in the Iraqi government are al-Dawa and the Supreme Council for the Islamic Revolution. Both of these parties are Shiite-dominated, period, coalitions. And they are the majority members of the Iraqi government. Both parties, just to make it a little simpler, fall under the umbrella of the United Iraqi Alliance, which is a bit of a misnomer because they mainly represent the Shia population and not all of Iraqi's population. Now, the Kurds are mainly represented by Talabani. President Talabani, I think is how you pronounce his name, who is a Kurd, and they kind of have their own autonomous thing going in the north. So let's leave them out for now, and we'll get into them later. Let's look first at Maliki's party, United Iraqi Alliance. His branch is called Al-Dawa. Who is Al-Dawa? And just like Bush represents the Republicans, right? He represents Al-Dawa. Al-Dawa was formed in the 1950s as a Shia opposition group to the then British and eventually to the Saddam Hussein Baathists. They were persecuted, tortured, even though they represented the majority population, they were persecuted. Now, Al-Dawa was co-founded by a very interesting name that you'll probably ring a bell. His name was Mohammed al-Sadr, the father-in-law of Muqtada al-Sadr. Muqtada al-Sadr, right, the head of the Mahdi army, the person that the American government loves to blame for most of the Shiite militia violence in Iraq presently, that Muqtada al-Sadr. So Maliki's party was co-founded by this guy Sadr's father-in-law. So right there you can understand why he has such support from al-Sadr's group and why he needs them to stay in power. So if America is considering al-Sadr an enemy, then Maliki ain't so far behind, is he? Secondly, Al-Dawa became very good friends with Iran, or maybe not very good friends, but supported by Iran in the mid-70s. Mainly, one of the reasons was because another name that might ring a bell, the Ayatollah Khomeini, took refuge in Najaf, Iraq, because the Shah exiled him. Al-Dawa protected Khomeini and befriended him, and supported his Iranian Revolution, Islamic Revolution, in 1979. Al-Dawa, Maliki's party. This is the same Khomeini, right, who took all the American hostages in '79, the famous hostage incident. So Al-Dawa fights on the Iranian side within Iraq during the Iraqi-Iranian War, on the wrong side of America. And America actually labels them a terrorist organization because they bombed the American embassy and the French embassy in Kuwait. 17 members of Al-Dawa were captured and jailed, and a few of them sentenced to death, including one present member of the Iraqi parliament. Someone who was sentenced to death for bombing the American embassy, part of the Iraqi parliament. So if you look at the history, you can automatically see the direct ties between Al-Dawa, Khomeini, Iran, Muqtada al-Sadr,